What are the key skills in fast breaststroke? Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. In this video, we're going to start a series on the skills of breaststroke and what they look like in simple terms. Specifically today, we're going to talk about upper body propulsion and how to create a more effective arm pull. The purpose of a great arm pull is to move more water backward, and the more water a swimmer can move backward, the faster they can move forward. So what swimmers have to do is orient their arms in a way that allows them to move a lot of water backward and do so at a pretty high tempo and do so with pretty good efficiency. Because if they can't move a lot of water backwards, they're going to struggle. If they can't move a lot of water backwards pretty quickly, they're going to struggle. And if they can't do so efficiently, they're going to get really tired really fast. And so for those reasons, swimmers tend to adopt a pretty similar strategy for executing breaststroke pulls, and that's what we're going to take a look at today. And as we go through, there are three key skills that swimmers need to execute. They need to create a big surface area with their arm in order to move a lot of water backwards. The bigger the surface area, the more effectively they're going to be able to move water with each stroke. They need to move that surface area backwards for as long as possible in order to move as much water for as long as possible. And lastly, they need to accelerate the arm through the pull in order to create more speed. So let's check it out and see what it looks like. All right, so when swimmers set up their stroke, what they're doing in the front half of the stroke is they're creating a surface area that involves the whole hand and the whole forearm that can be moved backwards. And so you can see that position here. They're moving the hands and they're getting the arms in a position where they can be oriented backwards. And so that's the first key skill that swimmers need to execute when they set up the stroke. So when they're sliding the hands out, what they're doing is they're popping the elbows up, they're letting the hands come down so that they can create a big surface area with the arm and the hand to create a lot of propulsion and move water backwards. So we'll see it again here, and then they're sliding out, and then you can see, because just remember we're at an angle from underneath, he's got a big surface area with that whole forearm, and it's moving backwards. You can see right there, the whole forearm is moving backwards effectively. So we'll pay attention to the same thing with another swimmer, and you can see here, it's a little bit more exaggerated. She's got a little bit wider pull, but you can see she's moving from the hands out in front to getting the forearm in position where it can effectively move water backwards in addition to the hand. So by this position, she's got it pretty synced up so that a lot of surface area is moving backwards. And the more effectively she can do that, the more water she's going to be able to move backwards. And so she does a really good job with that. You can see right in there in that position, she's set up to move a lot of water backwards. Right there, you can see the forearm and the hand are going to be used as a surface area to create a lot of propulsion. So the next piece of it is moving that surface area backwards for as long as possible. Now obviously in breaststroke, the stroke gets cut off pretty early. However, you can still create a pretty large range of motion even with that limitation. So we'll watch that here. So he's in a pretty good position by right about here, and it's moving backwards, straight backwards, all the way till right about there. So if you watch his elbow, it's coming in pretty close to his body. He's basically squeezed as much as he can out of it. The only difference from here, he could extend his arms, but that wouldn't create that much propulsion because he's got most of the propulsion using the muscles of the chest and the back. So again, he's setting it up here and then pulling straight back all the way right to there, and that's when he ends the stroke so that he can recover the arms. So still a pretty big surface area. And just think about if that was butterfly, he's halfway through the pull of butterfly at least before he starts to turn things in and recover the arms. So pretty long surface area, and it's not this sculling motion that's just happening with the hands. You can see the elbows are moving backwards, and that means there's a full backwards pull. The elbows are way out in front and they're squeezing all the way back. That's going to create a lot of propulsion, and it's a pretty big range of motion that he's using there. So we'll watch the same thing in a second athlete. So it sets up there and then squeezing all the way back there, and now she's recovering the arms. So the same thing, she's pulling the elbows back pretty far. She's squeezing all the way, getting a full pull out of it, and then recovering the arms. So right there, that's when she finishes the pull. And so again, the elbows are moving pretty far back. It's over a pretty far range of motion. And so wherever the elbow goes, the forearm goes, so that forearm's moving back over a pretty far range of motion, and that's going to create a lot of propulsion. So it's pretty simple. Get the forearms facing backwards and then pull back as long as they can until they have to recover the arms. Right here to there, it's a straight backwards pull. From right there, it almost looks like butterfly. It is pretty similar to butterfly. Right there, she's pulling herself back, and you can see the acceleration of her body forwards as a result of that backwards pull. So she's starting to hold water here and then ripping it straight back to there. We'll see it one more time, ripping it straight back to there. So it's key to create a big surface area and then move it for as long as possible to create as much propulsion as possible. So the last thing we want to pay attention to is accelerating the arms. So not only do they want to move water backwards with a big surface area over a long period of time, they want to accelerate that to maintain pressure and continue to create propulsion. And so it's patience, and then you can see right there, there's an acceleration through the back of the stroke. So it's patience when he sets it up, and then he accelerates through the pull, and he really gets it ripping as the arms close into the body. So right there, you can see the acceleration. So right there's that acceleration of the pull. And because the pull isn't that long in terms of how long it takes and the range of motion that it goes through, because the hands aren't moving all the way down to the hips, it's going to be a pretty short range of motion, but the acceleration is going to happen fast. Right there, you can see he picks it up right there. So the more that swimmers can accelerate the pull, the more speed they're going to create, and that's ultimately going to allow for faster swimming. So watching with another athlete here, patience and then acceleration, patience and then acceleration. And so once she gets into that position where she sets up the stroke, right there, now she's accelerating and ripping it back. You can even start to see the cavitation pick up right there. She kind of separates from the bubbles a little bit because that's when she really starts to crank on it. That's when she really starts to accelerate the arms. So setting up and then accelerating the pull, set it up and then accelerating the pull. And that's going to create the most propulsion, getting a big surface area, a long range of motion, and really accelerating it. There was one more aspect of the pull that I want to touch on, and that's kind of the muscles that are driving the pull and the actions that facilitate the use of those muscles. So the biggest muscles and the strongest muscles of the upper body are your chest, your pec muscles, and then the muscles of your upper back, your lat muscles on the side. When those muscles are working, swimmers are going to be able to swim faster because they can create a lot more force. Because those are big muscles, they can be used over the course of an entire race. And while, of course, they're going to fatigue in a way that still allows swimmers to perform. So one of the things I want you to pay attention to is when the armpit is open, these muscles are on stretch, and that means they can be contracted. And so by closing the armpit, we're squeezing those muscles, and that's going to create a really strong pull. And so what we'll watch here with breaststroke is essentially what they do when they execute the skills we've discussed earlier is they open the armpit up. We'll be able to see that big space in here. And then when they pull, they close that armpit down. So we'll watch here as he sets up the stroke. As you can see here, there's a lot of space in his armpit here. And then as he pulls, it all closes down and disappears. And then he goes back, sets up the stroke again. And so right as he sets it up, he's created a lot of space in that armpit here, and then he's going to close it back down. And so that's the key skill, using those muscles and then creating a situation where the armpit is open, they're still in an effective pulling position, the forearms facing backwards, and then from that position, they can squeeze and pull everything through. We'll take a look at it from another view here so you can see the open armpit aspect of it. And so as this swimmer sets up the pull, you can see right there, there's a lot of space in there. You can even see her shoulder blades start to pop out because they're on stretch. It's opened up. And then as she pulls, squeezes closed, you can see that space is really open there. All of a sudden it closes down and then it disappears. And that's because she's created a strong pull using the strongest muscles of the body. So when she sets it up, there's a lot of space, especially right there. And then squeeze, pull, closes it all down. And you can see the acceleration of the body as a result of that. She's coming forward, she's coming up, and that means that she's creating speed. So an interesting way to think about that, if your swimmers aren't creating situations where they're opening up the armpits and then squeezing them through, they probably have things to work on in terms of improving their pull. And that could be either they're not creating a big surface area, they're not pulling backwards, they're not accelerating the hands. And so it's a great way to kind of think about things, especially from the perspective of which muscles are really driving the show and which are creating a lot of propulsion. So we'll take a look at this one more time in this swimmer. And as you can see, big space here. There's a lot of space in that armpit. And then boom, she squeezes, closes it off, executes a great pull. Same thing, sets it up, a lot of space, and then boom, squeezes it through, executes a great pull. So ultimately, the breaststroke pull is not particularly complicated. They need to create a large surface area using the hand and the forearm, setting it up so they can move a lot of water backwards. Then they need to take that surface area and move it backwards for as long as they can, accelerating the hand as they go. And when they do that, they're creating a lot of space, they're opening up the armpit, and they're really squeezing it through and using the strongest muscles of the upper body in order to power that pull. How do swimmers effectively create propulsion with the lower body? We're going to talk about the breaststroke kick and what swimmers need to do in order to execute a great one. We're going to keep it simple and rather focusing on the specifics of what each swimmer has to do in terms of achieving a perfect model. We're going to talk about the basic principles so that swimmers can adapt the most effective kick to their body, their strengths, their limitations, because ultimately they're all different. They've got different levels of strength, they've got different levels of mobility, they've got different bone lengths, they've got different joint configurations, they've got all sorts of different things that we can never really fully appreciate. So it's going to be really difficult to determine what's the perfect kick. So instead, we got to focus on the principles, making sure that they execute those well. What are those principles? They've got to be able to create a big surface area with as much of the leg as possible. They've got to kick straight back so that they can move forward. And then lastly, they need to try to accelerate the kick as they move through. Let's dive in and see what it looks like in action. So the first thing we're going to pay attention to is creating a big surface area. So the way to do that is basically the feet need to turn out and the feet need to be wider than the knees. That's going to create a sideways surface area that can be used to move water backwards. If the feet stay within the knees, it's pretty much impossible for them to turn out. And if they can't turn out, now we don't have a surface area to push with and to kick with. And so a lot of times there's discussion in terms of how wide the kick should be. And from my perspective, we can't really know the exact anatomy of the hips and the knees. So it's tough to know how wide some swimmers should kick. But what definitely does need to happen is the feet need to get wider than the knees. And if so, someone's going to have a really wide kick, they just need to have really wide feet as well. And if they have a narrow kick, they still need to have the feet outside the knees. So we'll take a look at it, see what happens here. So you can see as she sets up, you can see the feet are outside the knees. And that allows her to create a surface area with the feet, turn them out, put them backwards, and then kind of push straight back. And that's the kicking action. And so the big surface area is going to come from especially the foot and then also the shin. The wider the shin can be, the further outside of the knee it can be, that's going to be a surface area as well. It might not be quite as effective as the foot, but it does have an impact. And if swimmers can leverage it, they want to do that. So again, you can see that surface area of the feet are wider than the knees, and that's going to create a nice platform to kick off of. We see that with this swimmer here, and again, right there, that foot turns out, the feet are wider than the knees, and then kicking straight back. And so you can see here especially, the underside of the foot right there is a big surface area that's moving water backwards, and that's where the effectiveness of the kick comes from. And so again, turn the feet out, get them pointed out, and then kicking straight back. So the big surface area comes from the feet turning out, the shins pointing out, and that creates a big paddle that they can use to kick with. So if we watch these swimmers here, we'll see the same thing. And what you'll see is that both of these swimmers, you can see the swimmer on the right there, you can see the feet outside the profile of the knees, and then on the left, the feet outside the profile of the knees. And what you can notice here is the swimmer on the left, they seem to get their feet out wider and their knees a little bit wider than the swimmer on the right. So they're both satisfying the same principles, but they're using a slightly different strategy. The swimmer on the left has a little bit wider kick, but still feet are outside the knees. And then the swimmer on the right has a little bit narrower kick and a little bit faster kick. But again, the feet are still outside the knees. So they're creating that surface area. They're just doing it in a slightly different way. So the next key skill we want to talk about is kicking straight back. And so there used to be the concept of up, out, and around, where the swimmers are really trying to kick around. That thought process definitely kind of receded, and it's much more of a direct kick backwards. The intent to kick is to kick straight backwards. Now, obviously, the feet aren't going to move directly backwards, especially because they're outside wide and they need to come together. And so they're going to come together, but there's not a specific intention to try to make that happen. There's not this sweeping action. It's more of a direct back kick. And because the feet have been turned out, they're necessarily going to come back into the middle. They're not going to go straight back. However, the intention is to go straight back. And just because of the way the joint's shaped, it's going to come back into the middle. But that's not what swimmers are trying to do. So if we watch here, she turns her feet out and then basically kicks straight back. You can see the feet are moving right back in. And they're not trying to, she's not sliding them out. She's not trying to kick around. She's just kicking back. And as the knees come back together, so too do the feet. So really the feet are following the knees, and the knees are just going to come together because they extend. And so again, it's just turning it out right here, and then just kind of kicking straight back. And again, it's not going to be a perfectly straight line, and it's not going to be really a straight line at all, but the intention is just to kick back. Because of the structures of the joints, there's going to be a curvilinear action. It's going to curve a little bit, but the intention is to kick back. And so if she was using the strategy of kicking around, what would happen here is that you'd see the knees slide out and around, but they don't. They just come right back into the middle. It's directly backwards. And so it's a very direct kicking action. So we'll watch it again here with these two swimmers. And so again, they turn the feet out and then they kick them back. The knees don't move during that kick. They may move in, but they certainly don't move out. There's no around action. It's just a straight back kicking action, and that's going to move swimmers forward. The more they can kick water backwards, the more they're going to move forward. And again, there will be some curve to the kick, but that's not the intention, and swimmers shouldn't be trying to do that. They're just trying to kick straight back, and when they can do that effectively, that's going to move them forward. So a really good example of this, Adam Peaty, you can see there's very little waste of that kick. He's just kicking straight back. He's setting it up wide, just like we talked about earlier, and he's just going straight back. There's no around. There's not much of anything other than just kicking straight back. And so it's a very direct action, and the more direct it can be, one, it's going to be more effective because all of the energy is going to be moving the swimmer forward, but two, it's going to be faster. And the faster the kick can go, the faster the arms can go, the faster the overall stroke rate can go, and if it can be done without losing any of the effectiveness of the kick, they're not going to lose any stroke length, so they're just going to swim faster. So again, very direct kicking actions are going to be really effective at helping swimmers move quickly through the water. Set it up and then kick it straight back. So the last thing we're looking at is an acceleration of the foot through the kick. So there's a patient setup, and then there's a build throughout that kick. The foot speed's going to accelerate as they go, and that's going to allow them to create more and more propulsion. So we'll watch here in relatively slow motion. You can see the kick pick up the speed at the end, and that's what they're doing. So they're setting it up, being a little bit patient, and then boom, accelerating through the back of the kick. So watch a little bit faster. You can see, accelerate the foot speed through, sets the kick up, and then boom, accelerates the kick, accelerates the kick. And so if swimmers are passive with it, they're not going to be able to maintain pressure on the water, and they're not going to get nearly as much out of the kick. So even if they execute a technically perfect kick, if there's no acceleration, there's no push behind it, they're not going to get much out of the kick, and that means they're not going to swim particularly fast. So these two swimmers again, and you can see the setup, and then boom, accelerate the kick, especially through the middle portion of the kick, as there's a real acceleration to pick the foot speed up, and that's going to surge the swimmer forward as they go through. Right there, there's the acceleration, and you can see the snap through with each kick. This is particularly evident with this swimmer. You can see sets it up, patience, and then boom, and really accelerates the kick and blasts it straight back and really gets the foot speed up. And so that's really what swimmers need to accomplish, is setting it up, kicking back, and then really accelerating the feet to get as much propulsion as they can out of each kick. So ultimately, the breaststroke kick is not super complicated. Swimmers need to be able to turn their feet out, get their feet wider than their knees, and then just blast that kick back, straight back, accelerating as they go. And so the more range of motion they have through the legs, the more options they're going to have in terms of where they can position the legs. If they're really limited in their range of motion, it's going to be more difficult to really get a great surface area. So it's important to have the physical requirements to kick effectively. And it's not just range of motion. Swimmers need the strength to kick in those positions. And the stronger they are, the more they're going to be able to accelerate the water. So set up the kick effectively by turning the feet out, getting the feet wide. The knees might not be quite as important, provided that they're inside the feet. Kick straight back and accelerate that kick straight back. And if swimmers can do that, they're going to be able to execute an effective breaststroke kick. And if they can execute an effective breaststroke kick, they're going to swim faster. More than any other stroke, breaststroke creates a lot of drag. And if swimmers want to go fast, they have to learn to minimize the amount of drag they create. We're going to take a look at the skill of horizontal alignment in breaststroke, because the more horizontally aligned swimmers can be as they move through the water, the faster they're going to swim. And unfortunately, because of the arm recoveries, because of the breath, and because of the leg recoveries, it can be really difficult to maintain and establish great horizontal alignment through the water. One of the key skills that elite breaststrokers consistently demonstrate is the ability to maintain horizontal alignment as much as possible throughout the entire stroke. They do a really good job of making sure their hips stay up at the surface of the water throughout the stroke, and in every stroke, they always establish complete horizontal alignment regardless of how fast they're swimming and how fast they're moving their arms and legs. Let's check it out. Because it happens a little bit slower over 200-meter races, we're going to take a look at 200-meter swimmers first, and then we'll take a look at 100-meter swimmers. So if you see here, swimmers here, what they're going to do is they're going to achieve a position where they're completely horizontal in the water. You can see the end of the stroke here, the swimmer on the top is literally completely straight from toes to feet. And so that's going to minimize the amount of drag that he creates as he moves through the water. And then as you watch his hip position here, as he takes his pull, his hip position, even though his head and his shoulders are coming up out of the water, it's not dropping at all. And if anything, it's actually rising up. And so what can tend to happen is that when swimmers come up to breathe, they're going to drop their hips down, and that's going to destroy their horizontal alignment. Now we'll watch the swimmer on the left, and you can see here his hips are staying up at the surface as he breathes. And as he returns back down, he's going to establish a really aligned position where his head's down, arms are straight ahead, legs are straight back, and he's in really good alignment. And as he takes his pull here, hips stay up at the surface. And again, they may even rise up at the surface a little bit. So everything stays in a really good alignment. And then after each stroke, they get back to an excellent alignment so that they can minimize the amount of drag that they create. If swimmers don't come back into this horizontal streamlined posture here, what's going to happen is they tend to get higher and higher and higher, and that's going to make them go slower and slower and slower. They're going to get more and more tired, and that's a vicious cycle that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So relatively simple skills, not always particularly easy to do, but keeping the hips up at the surface throughout the breath, and then also making sure that each stroke has a point of complete horizontal alignment. So we'll take a look at another swimmer here, and you can see the hips right at the same place the entire time. They never drop, and she does a really good job of getting back into alignment at the end of each stroke. So maintaining as much horizontal alignment as possible throughout the stroke. There's going to be some disruption in order to pull, in order to kick, but that disruption is minimized by keeping the hips up at the surface and then making sure that the horizontal alignment is completely reestablished after each stroke. So while better streamlining and better alignment tends to be thought of as associated with 200-meter swimming, as we'll see here, that's not necessarily the case, and 100-meter swimmers do the same thing even when they're swimming at world record speeds. So you can see here during the pull, the hips stay up, there's no drop in the hip, and then the swimmer is going to get back into a completely aligned position. He's horizontal in the water, his head is down, his hips are up, and then his legs are up and his arms are outstretched. So even though he's swimming at a really high rate and a really high speed, he's still able to keep the hips up when he pulls, and he's able to get back into an aligned position in between each stroke. So even at really high speeds, he's taking the time and the effort to make sure that he maintains as much horizontal alignment throughout the stroke as possible. One of the mistakes that many swimmers make when they try to swim fast breaststroke is they just go to really high tempo and they never get back into alignment every time. And what happens? More and more drag, more and more fatigue, which means more and more drag, which means slower and slower swimming. So swimmers have to make sure that they maintain their horizontal alignment, or they're going to pay the price, and they're going to pay the price really quickly and really severely. So we'll take a look at another swimmer here, and as you can see, as she pulls, the hips stay up at the surface, and she does a really good job of getting back into alignment throughout each stroke. And so she's horizontal in the water here. She's not swimming with the head up and the hips down. She's getting really great alignment, and she's doing that, again, at really high speeds, and she's making sure that she establishes great alignment with each stroke. And even though she's going to start her stroke pretty early, she's still in great alignment, at least for a split second, before she comes back out of it. And because of that, she's going to get back in line, she's going to minimize the drag, she's going to give herself a little bit of break, and she's going to prevent herself from getting worse and worse and worse as she goes through the swim and as she begins to get fatigued. So alignment in breaststroke is ultimately simple. Swimmers need to maintain a great horizontally aligned position as they take the pull and as they take the breath, and just as importantly, they need to make sure that they always achieve a horizontal position, at least at some point in the stroke. Doing so is going to greatly reduce the amount of drag that they create, and it's going to allow them to create a lot more speed with a lot less effort. How do swimmers manage to create great alignment in breaststroke all while swimming at really high stroke rates? So we're going to continue to discuss breaststroke skills. In particular, we're going to expand upon the previous video, horizontal alignment, and now we're going to talk about the key skill of reestablishing horizontal alignment and how to actually do that while swimming with really high stroke rates. One of the mistakes you commonly see in breaststroke is when they try to pick up the stroke rate, they never get back to a fully aligned position. They stay somewhat elevated with their skills, and they just kind of progress through the race like that, and that's going to slow them down, and it's going to make them really tired. When swimmers try to swim fast, the instinct is to pick up the rate rather than maintaining their skills, and this is certainly the case in breaststroke. However, if things are done right, swimmers are able to reestablish great alignment after each stroke cycle, and they can do so without dropping the stroke rate. So in this video, we're going to go over the key skills to make that happen. When swimmers breathe, they have to recover the head and they have to recover the arms forward. So they can do that passively, or they can do so in a way that actually promotes their alignment. So what I want you to pay attention to here is you can see how when swimmers breathe, they breathe forward and they breathe aggressively forward and they recover the arms aggressively forward. And what that's going to do, it's just like a teeter-totter. When one end goes aggressively forward and down, the other end's going to come up. And so if you watch the swimmer here in the yellow cap, you can see him be aggressive coming forward and watch hips pop right up there. And that's going to get him back into alignment. And so when swimmers recover, if they can do so with an aggressive lunge, an aggressive attack with the head, the shoulders, and the arms, they can use that to help influence their body position so that once they get fully extended in the front of the stroke, they're already ready, in position, in alignment, and they can move right into the next stroke. If swimmers do it passively, they're not going to have the alignment that they want, or they're going to have to wait in order to get the alignment that they want. And in both cases, that's going to slow them down significantly. So we can see the same thing here. You can see the swimmers are being aggressive with breathing. They're breathing forward. They're not breathing up. And they're recovering the arms aggressively, which is going to get everything in front of their body and help them get the hips up in line once they get full extension in the stroke. You can see it here. Watch how the swimmers are aggressively getting forward. You can see their hips pop up. You can see the wave pop up with each stroke. So what they're doing is they're using the weight of the head, the chest, and the arms to create a lever to pop the hips up. And the more aggressively they can recover the arms forward, that's going to facilitate their stroke rate, but it's also going to do so in a way that puts them in position to be in alignment right when they reach full extension, and they can move right into the next stroke without any hesitation. And so you can see here on both swimmers, there's a really aggressive lunge forward, and the hips are going to pop up as a result. And again, that's going to accomplish two goals, keeping the stroke rate up and getting a great alignment at the same time. So we'll watch it from under the surface here. You can see the head presses down, the chest presses down, and his hips are up at the surface when he's reached full extension of the stroke. And you'll notice too, there's no real hesitation in the front of the stroke. He doesn't have to wait for it to happen. As a result of pressing the chest and reaching forward, he gets right into a line. So there's that aggressive lunge, and the hips pop down because everything's sinking in the front of the stroke. And again, he can move right into the next cycle. So swimmers can actually use their stroke rate to help facilitate better alignment. And again, that allows them to get the best of both worlds, higher rate and better alignment. And so by aggressively recovering the arms, the chest, the head, and the shoulders, you can get a lot of weight in front of the body, and that's going to press the chest down, which is going to pop the hips up. We'll see it with another athlete here. Right there, you can see the hips pop up as she comes forward. Again, it's a subtle movement, but it makes a big difference right there in terms of how much drag is created and therefore how much speed is created. And again, there's no hesitation at all in this stroke, but right there, that little extra lunge, that little extra effort getting forward is going to pop the hips up so she doesn't have to worry about it. She doesn't have to wait for the hips up right there. It all just happens as a natural result of an effective and aggressive arm recovery and breath recovery. So we'll take a look at one more swimmer here, and you can see driving forwards and his hips pop up. And with an aggressive recovery right there forwards, throws the head down, and then the hips pop up, and it allows him to be in excellent position to initiate the next pull. And so, again, recovering everything aggressively right there, and snapping the head down, snapping the chest down, snapping the hands forward. That's going to pop the hips up, and allow them to get in great alignment with very little time, which enables him to get into the next stroke without compromising his streamline. And so what will happen a lot of times, swimmers will be a little bit lazy on that recovery, and they'll never get the hips back up, and they kind of start sliding through the surface, and again, creating a lot of drag, losing speed, and it's going to cost them a whole lot more energy in order to keep moving forward. So by being really aggressive with the arm recoveries, and not just the arms, but the head and the shoulders, it's going to get everything back in line, which is going to make everything flow more smoothly, and it's less that swimmers have to think about. They don't have to worry about getting back into alignment because just by recovering the arms, it all takes care of itself. So it's a simple skill, but it's one that can really have a powerful impact on how fast swimmers go, especially in the sprint events, because they don't have time to wait around to get back into alignment. They have to execute their skills in a way that ensures they get back into alignment with every stroke cycle, and they do so in a way that doesn't slow their stroke cycle down. What's the key to effective breaststroke timing? Breaststroke timing is one of those things that can be really frustrating for both swimmers and coaches alike. It can be there one moment and gone the next. It's something that swimmers really struggle with achieving in the first place, and once they get it, it can be something that can disappear just as fast. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the underlying skills which determine effective breaststroke timing, and we're going to keep them as simple as possible so that way we can help swimmers learn those key skills as quickly and easily as possible. And as we'll see, effective timing changes based upon how fast swimmers are going to swim. And when swimmers understand what great timing is all about, they can adjust their timing in order to meet the demands of the event and adjust their timing based upon their own specific needs. Let's dive in. As frustrating as breaststroke timing can be, it's actually pretty simple when it comes down to what swimmers need to do in order to swim well. They need to time the stroke so that they can create a lot of propulsion with the arms when the legs are in a streamlined position, and then create a lot of propulsion with the legs when the arms are in a streamlined position. They have to time those two different goals so that they can both happen at the same time, and they can happen at relatively high stroke rates. So let's take a look at it in a 200 breaststroke context when there's a little bit less pressure to keep the rate up. So as we'll see with this swimmer here, he's pulling, but his legs are almost completely straight, and he's in great alignment with his lower body. So that's going to reduce the amount of resistance he creates as he's creating a lot of propulsion. So it's adding a positive and a really small negative instead of a really big negative, which is just going to cancel out that propulsion. So we want a lot of propulsion and not a lot of resistance. So you can see the legs stay pretty long, pretty streamlined. Right now he's finished his pull. Now the legs are going to start to come up. And then he recovers the arms really quickly, and he just now starts the kick, and he's almost in a perfect streamline already. And then once he gets to the second half of the kick, he is in a really great line. So what they're trying to do is create as much propulsion as they can with the arms when the legs are really streamlined. So right here, legs are really streamlined, and then kicking once the arms are moving into alignment and they've achieved a really good streamlined position, then the legs go. So that's ultimately what swimmers need to do. There's going to be a gap between the arm action and the leg action. So the arm action happens here, right now. The arm action happens, and then the leg action happens. And then in the front of the stroke, the leg action happens, and then we're going to wait for the arm action to happen. So there's going to be space between the arms and space between the legs. What determines the amount of space is going to be the distance that the swimmers are swimming, as well as how effective their kick is. The better their kick is, the more they can wait in the front of the stroke, and the slower the stroke rate that they're using, the more space they can have between the arms and the legs. So let's take a look at the swimmer on the left here too. So he's pulling, his legs haven't moved, he's finished his pull, and now he executes his kick, and right when he's performing the propulsive portion of his kick, he's already in a great streamline, he's already aligned, and he maintains that. And so again, there's a space, he waits to set up the pull, then it's arms, all the way through, and then legs. So there's space between the arm actions, there's space between the leg actions, and that allows them to maintain and achieve a really streamlined position before they create propulsion with either the arms or the legs. So if we watch this swimmer here, she's going to pull, the legs are still in really great alignment, and as she kicks, the upper body's in really great alignment. So arms, legs, and each time the kick is happening when the arms are streamlined, and the pull is happening when the legs are streamlined. So it's the same principle every time. Swimmers have to time their arm actions and their leg actions to maximize propulsion at times when there's as little resistance as possible. The bigger the positive, the smaller the negative, the more speed that swimmers are going to create as they move through the water. So we've seen what happens when swimmers are performing over 200 meters. How do things change when they're swimming faster over 100 meters when they're using higher stroke rates? So if we watch this swimmer here, she's going to take her pull. Her legs are still streamlined. She's just finished the pull, and now she's setting up the kick. So right here, she's about to initiate the propulsive portion of the kick, and she's already in streamline. So again, arms are pulling, legs are in line, legs are kicking, upper body is in line. So the same thing happens as when they're swimming over 200 meters. The key difference is that there's very little space between the arm and leg actions. So as she finishes the kick here, she's already getting into the pull. She hasn't lost her alignment, but she's starting to set up for the pull. And as she pulls, as soon as she finishes the pull, those legs start shooting up, and they shoot up fast. And so that's the key difference, is the arm and leg recoveries happen much faster, and there's very little space between the arm and leg actions. So the arm actions don't change very much, the leg actions don't change very much, and they both still occur when the opposite set of limbs is in a streamlined position. The difference is those spaces between the arm and leg actions shrink, and the arm and leg recoveries happen a lot faster so that the arms and legs can be in position to create more propulsion sooner and be aligned faster. We'll take a look at one more sprinter here to illustrate the concept. So he's executing his pull. He's finished his pull. His legs are still in really great alignment, and he's just starting the kick, and his upper body's in great alignment. So same thing here. Starts the pull. Legs are still in great alignment, and then both the arms and the legs recover really fast so that the swimmer can get into a position to create propulsion with the legs quickly, and also get the upper body in position to be streamlined quickly. And that way, he can create a lot of propulsion with the legs while still getting in a really great aligned position and keeping the stroke rate up. So even though this swimmer is swimming 100 meters at world record pace, there's still separation of the arms and the legs. There's still the same effective timing. What changes is that the speed of the arm recoveries and the leg recoveries increases, and there's less separation between the arms and the legs. It still exists, but there's less of a gap between when the arms work and when the legs work. And so the key timing skill that swimmers need to learn is how to separate the arms and the legs to create propulsion with the arms when the legs are in line, and create propulsion with the legs when the arms are in line. And then they need to learn how to change the degree of separation depending upon the event they're swimming. When they're swimming longer, when they're swimming slower, there should be more time between the arms and the legs. And when they're swimming faster, they can start to shrink that timing down. That way they can adjust their timing based upon what they need to achieve. So the key thing is the separation between the arms and the legs. That's what's going to allow breaststrokers to swim fast. And again, what they do to swim faster, they pick up the recovery speed, and they change the timing by shrinking those gaps. And so if swimmers can learn those skills, they can learn what it feels like, and they can learn how to control it. They're going to be able to consistently display great timing. And when they lose it, even in the middle of a race, they're going to be equipped to get it back because they know what it feels like. They know what they have to do. And when they have those skills, they can make the changes when they need to. Hope that was helpful. And as always, keep it simple. What are the key essentials of effective breaststroke pullouts? We're going to discuss the key skills that swimmers need to master in order to travel effectively and quickly underwater during breaststroke. So just like the other strokes, just like breaststroke in general, swimmers need to create a lot of propulsion as much as they can, and they need to minimize the resistance they create as they move through the water by optimizing their alignment. The major source of propulsion is going to be the arm pull, and to a lesser extent, the dolphin kick that they're going to take during the pullout. When it comes to alignment, it's managing the undulation that comes with the dolphin kick, as well as recovering the arms and the legs to begin the transition into breaststroke swimming. We'll take a look at all of it, go over the basic principles that apply, and provide you with some strategies that you can use to help your swimmers get faster. Let's dive in. When it comes to the arm pull, it's all about creating a big surface area with the hand and the forearm, orienting that surface area backwards, and then pulling backwards with as much acceleration as possible. So swimmers have to move from a streamlined position, they have to set up the stroke, and then they have to build the pressure as they move water backwards. So we'll take a look at the swimmer on the left. So he slides out, he gets everything facing backwards, and then it's pretty much a butterfly pull from there, and he pulls straight back. You can see right there, forearms are pretty much straight up and down, and he's moving them straight back to create propulsion, and you can see that little surge he gets as a result. Now, if we look at the swimmer in the center of the screen, I'm going to use the same basic idea. He's going to pull wider. he's going to pull deeper, he's going to pull straighter, and then he's going to get a really great push through the back of the stroke there. And so different swimmers are going to use a different strategy, likely dependent upon their strength, likely depending on the range of motion that they have access to. And so what's key is helping them figure out what's going to be the best path that allows them to move as much water for as much distance with as much acceleration as possible. That's likely going to lead to different solutions for different swimmers, but it's those principles that apply to everyone. And so if swimmers aren't getting into effective positions, or they're not accelerating the arms, or they're not pulling in a more or less directly backward manner, that's going to lead to creating less propulsion than would otherwise be possible. Take a look at a couple other swimmers here. So the swimmer in the center of your screen. Again, she's going to slide out, orient back, and then pull back. And so she has a little bit shallower of a pull, especially compared to the swimmer we just witnessed. So it's a different solution, but it may be optimal for this swimmer. The only way to really know is to experiment. And if we look at the swimmer on the left, again, sliding out, getting into a backward oriented position, you can see those forearms are starting to point down and then pulling straight back. And with her timing of the dolphin kick, it looks very much like a butterfly stroke with the finish of the kick. So again, same principles, different solutions for different swimmers. They may or may not be the most effective solution for that swimmer, but we need to appreciate that different swimmers are going to use different solutions because of the shape of their joints and the strength that they possess. So with these two swimmers, we're going to see two different timing of the dolphin kick. The swimmer on the top, the swimmer on the right is going to initiate the dolphin kick first and then take the pull. And then the swimmer on the left is going to pull and then take the dolphin kick. As with the pull, there may be some variation between different swimmers and how effectively they can use the dolphin kick and the best time to use the dolphin kick. My intuition is that the dolphin kick prior to the stroke is more effective than the dolphin kick later in the stroke. However, it's something that really needs to be experimented with different swimmers. And what's most important is to find the optimal kick for the optimal individual and what allows them to swim the fastest. At the end of the day, that's going to be what's most effective. Those tend to be the two options that most swimmers will gravitate towards. Again, it's figuring out what's going to be best. Regardless, they have to use that kick to create propulsion, and they got to use that kick to keep the momentum of the stroke. Whether they put it in the beginning or the end is not as important as how much speed it creates. Again, I tend to like the dolphin kick in the beginning because I think it helps prolong speed and helps them get into the pull a little bit faster. And the dolphin kick at the end doesn't tend to add quite as much because they've already created a lot of acceleration with the hands. But it doesn't really matter what I think. It ultimately matters what's going to work best for your swimmers and what allows them to create the most speed. One of the most important aspects of the pullout is maintaining really great alignment. And so it's the streamline coming off the wall, but also as they move through the undulation, while more undulation may result in a bigger dolphin kick and a more effective dolphin kick, it's also going to lead to more resistance as they disrupt the alignment. And so creating a kick, so using that dolphin kick, it's important to get some propulsion from it, but it can't come at the cost of creating a lot of extra resistance. So it has to be relatively tight and it has to be relatively fast, and that's a key aspect of creating an effective kick. And then as we see here with these swimmers, look at the alignment that they maintain after the pullout. It's not just pull and then go. They've got to hold everything together. They've got to maintain alignment, and they have to maintain as much speed as they can to maximize the distance that they get while losing as little velocity as possible. So the better swimmers can manage their alignment in between the different phases of the pullout, the more successful they're going to be, precisely because they're not putting on the brakes. The pullout itself, the dolphin kick itself, is like hitting the gas, but if they just come out of alignment right away or they don't maintain their alignment at the end of the pullout, they're not going to maintain any of that speed because they're putting on the brakes right away. So like these swimmers, maintaining really effective alignment is key for maintaining the speed that's generated as a result of the pullout itself. So helping swimmers understand what really good alignment is and what really good posture is key. A lot of times they just focus on the pullout itself, and that costs them a lot of speed because they're not paying attention to how well they're moving through the water after their pullout, which causes them to lose a lot of speed. Another key aspect of the pullout itself is the recovery and the transition from the pullout to surface swimming. And so obviously, breaststrokers are going to be underwater. They have to transition up to the surface. The more gradual that process can be versus a very abrupt process, that's going to result in the maintenance of more speed. So if we watch the swimmer on the left here, you're going to see that her transition is going to be a lot more gradual, and that's going to result in more speed. She's not jackknifing up to the surface, and she's going to have a patient transition, and that's going to allow her to maintain as much speed as possible. If we watch the swimmer on the right here, her trajectory is a lot more abrupt. Right there, she's shooting herself up to the surface. While that may get her to the surface faster, she's probably going to lose more speed as a result because she's moving through the water at an angle, a much stiffer angle, which is going to create a lot more resistance on her body. So the more gradual swimmers can be, and they have to manage that, the trade-off of staying underwater too long, and that's one of the challenges. They want to have as smooth a transition to the surface as possible, but they also have to get to the surface before they lose any speed. So that's one of the challenges here, is how do they maintain alignment without losing much speed or without taking too long. So the more slippery their body position can be, the more effective they're going to be, in one, in transitioning to the surface, and two, not losing speed when doing so. The last component of effective alignment is recovering the arms, recovering the legs in anticipation of beginning swimming breaststroke. And so swimmers aren't creating any propulsion. They have to move their arms up in front of their body. They have to move their feet to their butt, and they have to do so in a way that minimizes resistance. So they need to keep the arms tight to the body, like this swimmer is doing right here. They need to move them fast, and the same thing with the legs. Watch how quickly she recovered her legs. The longer she takes, the more drag she's going to create. So she recovers those feet quickly, gets them up, and then kicks out of it. So swimmers have to maintain as effective an alignment as they can when they're recovering the limbs, and they want that to happen fast. The longer it takes, the more they're going to slow down. So if they can keep everything tight to the body, and they can do so fast, they're going to be able to get to the surface quickly, and they're going to be able to do so without losing as much speed. A final aspect of the pullout, if we watch the swimmer on the left here, is managing the timing of when to initiate the pullout and then when to initiate the transition to the surface. There's not going to be a clean, concrete, and obvious point at which that transition should occur. Basically, what it's going to be is it's going to be the point at which they've slowed down sufficiently that they need to start to use the pullout to create speed, or they've slowed down to their racing speed and they need to get to the surface. And really, it should probably happen before that, just so that they don't lose any speed at all. So swimmers have to be able to feel when they're beginning to lose speed, and then they have to understand that that's when they have to make that transition to the pullout, or they have to make that transition to the surface. Because while they can prolong the distance of the pullout, that's ultimately going to cost them more time because it's slower. Again, it's a difficult skill to coach because it's something that has to be felt by the swimmer. The more aware they can become of when they're losing speed, the more aware they can become of when to transition into the next phase of the stroke. The better they get at that skill, the more speed they're going to be able to maintain, the faster they're going to go. Breaststroke pullouts come down to three key concepts. They need to create as much propulsion as they can by using the arms to create a big surface area, face directly backwards, move it as far backwards as possible with as much acceleration as possible. That's going to give them the pop that sends them forward. Add a quick, tight, snappy dolphin kick to help that process. And then from an alignment standpoint, they need to be as streamlined as possible, as horizontal as possible, and they need to maintain that position as they initiate the dolphin kick and as they recover the arms to get to the surface. And then when it comes to timing, they want to start the pullout, they want to start the transition to the surface to minimize any losses of speed so that they can keep their momentum and they can go as fast as possible. Like all the other strokes, it all comes down to the same three things: propulsion, alignment, and timing. And when swimmers can figure out how to do those three skills really well, they're going to have effective pullouts. Hope that was helpful. As always, keep it simple.